This is another program in the series Take Back Your Country, and I'm David Flint. The Australian Broadcasting Corporation, the ABC, seems to have really lost its way. It is in constant breach of the Charter. The Charter requires that news and information be accurate and impartial according to the recognised standards of objective journalism. That's pretty clear. And it's reasonable. News and information be accurate and impartial according to the recognised standards of objective journalism. It seems, however, that in the ABC there are a number of fiefdoms, particular programmes, which seem to be out of control, certainly out of control of the board. The board is required to control them. And they seem to be out of control, and they seem to have an agenda. And some of them have an agenda which seems to be particularly designed to get white, heterosexual, conservative males. There are a whole series of them. And for example, there's been an attack on Cardinal Pell, an attack on the former Attorney General Christian Porter, and an attack on the Prime Minister. And these have not been programs in accordance with the recognised standards of objective journalism, giving news and information which is accurate and impartial. That in relation to Cardinal Pell seemed to be designed to get him, and it ignored the usual rules of the presumption of innocence and the fact that in a criminal trial, the trial has to be proved beyond reasonable doubt. And eventually the case ended up in the High Court, and the High Court decided unanimously, all 7 judges were in agreement. That's quite rare. They were unanimous in that the trial was not run in accordance with those requirements. There was no presumption of innocence in relation to the Cardinal, and in particular, his case was not proved beyond reasonable doubt. In fact, a reasonable assumption, a reasonable assessment of the evidence in that case was that it would have been an offence which would have been impossible to have undertaken. And that was very clear. Yet the ABC had this agenda to get him, as they did in relation to the Attorney General Christian Porter. And that whole programme seemed to be designed to avoid the requirements of objective journalism. Because what they did in that case, and they've admitted it since, they've admitted that they could not prove what they were saying according to the civil standard. Now, in law, there's a criminal standard, which is higher, and that requires that a jury be satisfied beyond reasonable doubt. So there be no reasonable doubt as to guilt. And in the civil standard, that is where, for example, you have a defamation case, the case has to be proved on the balance of probabilities. And in the civil case concerning Attorney General Porter, they had to prove that what they were saying about the alleged rape was true on the balance of probabilities. And the ABC admitted they couldn't prove their case beyond the balance of probabilities. And when you look at the way the ABC reported the case against Christian Porter, he wasn't named, but he was sufficiently identified for a large number of people to realise that they were writing about Christian Porter. What they did there was to go to the broadcast without sufficient evidence, beyond reasonable doubt, of the truth of what they were saying. Now, remember, they have to do this according to the standards of recognised objective journalism. And I can say from my experience, many years at the Australian Press Council that they did not. No editor of a responsible newspaper, no editor of any newspaper, would have published that story without being satisfied that the journalist had sufficient evidence which would be able to persuade a court if a defamation case were brought, that they could prove it beyond the balance of probabilities. And they also omitted a necessary part of any publication, and that is, an editor would have required this, they didn't ask Attorney General Porter for comments from him on what they were about to publish. This is a necessary step in publishing a story in a newspaper which is going to shred the reputation of somebody. You give them a chance. You say, well, this is what we believe. This is what we're going to publish. But first, do you have anything to say about that? And sometimes a person will have something to say. They will have a pretty obvious defense which will persuade the editor that they'd better not publish it, because there's no chance that they could possibly show on the balance of possible probabilities that that was true. The ABC didn't do that. They didn't do either of those things, and yet they went to the programme making allegations against the Attorney General. More recently, they've done the same in relation to the Prime Minister in this ridiculous programme on Four Corners, that somehow he was somehow related with somebody from the peculiar American group QAnon, merely because the husband of the wife of a person known to the Prime Minister and his wife was some sort of supporter of QAnon. And there was no evidence of that. And this is what the ABC is indulging in a number of programs, in serious breach of the standards of objective journalism. And the board is not exercising control over parts of the ABC. Not all the ABC, but significant parts of the ABC. And at the same time, the ABC is failing in its obvious role. And its obvious role is to provide services, programs, which don't compete with commercial broadcasting. What's the point of, for example, putting cookery programs or talkback programs on the ABC when there are plenty of those on commercial radio or commercial television? What the ABC should be providing are those programs, quality programs, which you just don't get on free-to-air radio and television, and which you used to get. For example, programs which would give serious drama, good drama, quality Australian drama, which would give reviews of books and films, which would give the filming of opera and ballet, high culture, but which would also give such things as reviews of motor cars. The ABC used to have programs of reviews of motor cars, and the BBC has those, particularly in the past. They used to have particularly good ones. These are the sort of things, gardening programs, sports which aren't on commercial television, or those levels of sports which don't reach commercial television, those levels of football, for example, which don't appear. The commercial broadcasters only broadcasting the top programs in football and cricket and so on. These could be shown on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, but they're not being shown. The ABC has abandoned being a complementary programmer and offering those things. And there is a solution. It seems that the board just can't control the ABC. The best thing to do would be not to privatise the ABC, because these programs wouldn't then appear at all on radio and television. To get those quality programs in those areas where we're not seeing those programs would be for the ABC as to act as an allocator. What the ABC should be doing, it would require parliamentary intervention. And to an extent they do this already because they outsource a lot of programs. But what they should be doing is allocating sections of the channels to small broadcasters, independent broadcasters. They could be not-for-profits. They could be, for example, small business, and they could offer programs offering regular, for example, motor car reviews in which everybody's interested. Commercial radio and television can't do motor car reviews because they advertise motor cars. It would be very difficult if you're advertising, say, Toyota motor cars to then have reviews about Toyota motor cars and other motor cars. So this is the sort of thing the ABC could be doing. They could be doing film reviews, which we don't get anymore on the ABC. They could be doing all sorts of reviews on the ABC. They could be doing sporting programs, which we don't see. All of these could be done, and these could be done through independent broadcasters, whether they be not-for-profit, whether they be small business, and that would be the satisfactory way of ensuring that the ABC does these things which they show a distinct inability to do, and that in relation to news and current affairs, that these be produced according to the standards of objective journalism, and stop these agendas to get particular people, which is completely contrary to the ABC Charter. I'm David Flint, and this is Take Back Your Country, and details of that, well, it's not a movement, but that concept of taking back your country and finding a solution to take back your country are on the texts to this program. Thank you.